much, Dr. Roy. We used to play marbles at Kobe when we standard one. So, good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to deliver a dialogue session this morning. I guess I'm the only one who has prepared slides. So for those course participants, they understand this will be another 2-hour lecture. If you are lucky, I will give you a 7-minute break. But very fortunately for you, my colleagues have already covered all the points that I've prepared, most of it. So I guess I need to just sum up very quickly in the next 15 minutes. So what I'm going to talk a bit about what is traditional security, the strategic context of the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN-EU traditional security partnership, question mark. Now I've been asked to talk about traditional security partnership. So that is, I know I'm walking on very thin ice, but let's see how can that be done between EU and ASEAN. And of course, more importantly, what is that in store for Malaysia? So the EU traditionally has approached ASEAN member states, and even Indo-Pacific countries for the past decade or so. But the EU has used this, what scholars have called the normative approach or values-based approach, where you focus a lot on governance and of course human rights issues. So that of course led to many stumbling blocks, especially in ASEAN, where ASEAN member states, each of the countries have its own strategic interests, like interference in internal affairs, and a lot of countries have their own development, national interests, internal security problems that they need to address. So they have of course met a lot of obstacles in that aspect. But the EU has changed to a more pragmatic approach. Again, scholars call that pragmatic approach, in a sense more targeted to certain states within Indo-Pacific in relation to their own national interests. And they have gained success, especially with security dialogues that they have initiated with Vietnam and of course with Indonesia also. So with that foundation, then you understand that it will be difficult for EU to build traditional security partnership with ASEAN countries as a whole, as a bloc. You have been very successful, EU has been very successful in building non-traditional security partnerships, especially in relation to cyber security, human trafficking, environmental climate change issues, and so on. And of course money laundering, of course terrorism and counter piracy and that kind of non-traditional security issues. So to talk about traditional security partnership, it will be difficult because traditional security talks about defending, protecting national sovereignty, political sovereignty and territorial sovereignty using traditional security tools, which is military power. And of course, we talk about building formal alliances, about balancing power, and so on, right? So for those course participants, I think you have already discarded your IR theories, right? You have got rid of them. That's the most difficult part of your course. So how do we do it with ASEAN? You know, ASEAN has this ASEAN way, non-interference in internal affairs. We talk about neutrality. Some countries have non-alignment policies. And my colleague Raja also talks about the re-emergence of China, and within ASEAN, each country has their own different views and a long history of working with China. So how do you want to get ASEAN or even ASEAN member states to work with European Union and in the traditional security approach? Now I think the time is right. Why? Because right at our background of Indo-Pacific, we do have this simmering regional geopolitical tensions. So for some of us who attended the Asian Pacific Roundtable, APR, last couple of weeks, what was the keyword? US-China rivalry. So everyone is talking about great power competition in the Indo-Pacific, and more importantly, what kind of impact that would have on Southeast Asia. So we know that Indo-Pacific, the construct of Indo-Pacific was re-energized over the last decade or so at the background of this geopolitical context that's going on between these two great powers. We also know China has re-emerged, as Roger has talked about, and of course they have this 9-line claim, and that overlaps with some of our littoral Southeast Asia countries' own South China Sea claims, including Malaysia. And we understand that China has also taken very assertive actions in South China Sea to exercise its claims. Over the last week, we have heard about the water cannon incidents against Philippines ships that were trying to resupply the Marines. And of course, the big question, Taiwan, right? So everyone knows that Taiwan could be the future potential conflict in the region that may lead to a war breaking out that may have consequence for Southeast Asia. Now, do not think that it's not a possibility. Look what happened in Russia, Ukraine. So back in 2021, nobody would thought there would be a war in Europe. 2022, February 24th, a war erupted, right? So do not think that would not be a possibility. So with all this great power competition, security race, so I believe the time is right for ASEAN or ASEAN member states to look into traditional security partnerships, how to build your own capabilities and capacities in your in certain niche areas when it comes to your military power. So how can EU do that with Southeast Asia member states, right? So ASEAN should not be complacent. Peace will not last forever, right? We have many decades of peace in our backyard for the last 30, 40 years, relatively. But bear in mind, as the long history, world history has shown us, peace do not last forever. It's a cycle. There will be war, there will be peace, there will be war, and there will be peace. So with that kind of tension simmering in our backyard, it's time for ASEAN or ASEAN member states to seriously ponder on the possibility of building traditional security partnerships. So how do you do it? Now, as I mentioned earlier on, EU will face stumbling blocks trying to build traditional security partnerships with ASEAN as a bloc. Because ASEAN way of doing business is consensus decision making. So all members must agree before they can decide whether ASEAN to do something or to move ahead. And it takes a long time before they can even decide on any issue, right? So what EU can think about is, now this is just my point of view, building mini-lateralism with some ASEAN member states. It has happened before and it has been successful. When ASEAN member states faced with existential threats. For example, in the Sulu Sea, there was a big number of cases of sea robberies, kidnapped for ransom cases. Indonesia, Philippines, and Malaysia came together and built the trilateral maritime patrol that His Excellency has mentioned just now. Straits of Malacca in the early 2000s, a lot of sea robberies. And of course, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, later Singapore joined in. In the Malacca Straits Patrol that started in 2004 and 2005, the Malacca Straits Air Patrols. So there were joint patrols coordinated between these members to secure Straits of Malacca and of course in the Sulu Sea. So minilateralism can work and has worked before in ASEAN. So maybe EU can take the approach to work with a few like-minded countries that share similar interests, security interests, and develop from there. So if you still face stumbling blocks, the EU can consider bilateral partnerships. So there will be ASEAN member states that have strong interests to work closely with the EU to build up its partnership to work in traditional security issues. So that could be another option. From there, if it's sustainable, viable, built into minilateral partnerships, and of course from there you can enlarge, and maybe one day, wishfully thinking, you can engage the whole ASEAN bloc to join in a traditional security partnership. I'm talking about partnership, so do not think about this as a former military alliances, defense pact, partnership, how to work together in a cooperative spirit to build capacity and capabilities in terms of traditional security. So one area is, I'm sure you must be thinking, am I talking about full spectrum of warfare, land, sea, air, cyberspace warfare. Now, what I'm thinking is traditional security partnership with EU and ASEAN member states. You can start small, look into cyber defense, cyber warfare. As I mentioned, you have already worked very closely, EU and Indo-Pacific states, members in ASEAN on non-traditional security, and one aspect of it was cyber security, which Tom also mentioned about cyber security. You can build on that and expand it into cyber defense that is used by the armed forces. That's one area that is emergence. You can talk about capacity building, capability buildings, yeah? Both software and hardware. And of course, from there you can move into another area of cooperation, defense industry, cyber defense industry. How to work, collaborate with local defense companies on cyber technology, right? Building software, hardware, and of course with artificial intelligence, AI, incorporated into it. So you can use that niche area, cyber defense, cyber offense, and the technology related, and build a small ecosystem between EU, ASEAN member states, bilaterally, unilaterally, and of course, hopefully later with ASEAN as a whole. So we are not moving into too sensitive military areas, right? Full spectrum, weapon systems, and so on, right? So we start in a niche area, start small, and see how it can grow. What about Malaysia then? You must be thinking. Well, Malaysia is not an alien to EU. As Tuan Saipo has mentioned, we are, even within the Malaysian Armed Forces, we have been using a lot of equipment from EU members. So he did mention France, Germany, of course Italy also, and even Poland. Our main battle tanks were bought from Poland, and recently Norway. We just bought the Naval Strike missiles that will be used by the Navy. Right? So we have a strong relationship with EU, and between Malaysia and EU partnerships in terms of traditional security areas, I believe there are avenues for us to grow to a more stronger level between EU and Malaysia. So EU and ASEAN, in summary, I think I've almost come to my last slide. We can consider there are options where EU and ASEAN can work towards traditional security partnerships, right? Grow from the non-traditional security area to traditional security area. It's not a taboo, right? We're not saying, oh, traditional security, we're talking about formal military partnerships and alliances. You can, as I mentioned, start small, look into cyber defense capabilities and build that. Work with the cyber defense industry, collaboration. It will be a win-win situation because this will be a lucrative Southeast Asia defense market for European Union companies that have very high expertise and technology in terms of cyber defense equipment and know-how. And from there, the local indigenous defense companies can grow and of course come up with their own software and hardware and AI, enable technology in the future. So there will be more options for Malaysia. This won't go against Malaysia's foreign policy. Malaysia talks about neutrality because if we work with EU, we are also building other bilateral and multilateral partnerships we already have with other powerful countries. So why not we engage with EU, another partner in terms of traditional security? So we have more friends. So that makes us more neutral in that sense. So with that, I conclude my short lecture today with an old saying. When there is danger, there is opportunity. So with that, thank you very much.